Detective, to the extent that you can, generally tell us what you understand. You may then look back on your police report and correct anything that you believe might have been an error. So you entered the establishment, and you sat down at the bar?
Yes, sir. I
All right.
sat down at the bar. I was then approached by a unidentified black female who was later identified as Nakisha Haskins. Ms. Haskins approached me, asked me if I was tipping, then advised her yes. At that point in time, Ms. Haskins then turned around with her back facing me and began to dance in front of me. Ms. Haskins had a, if I can refer to my notes, Ms. Haskins had a tattoo on her back that read blessed. I then asked Ms. Haskins, what did the tattoo say? She stated that it was blessed. It said blessed, if I can refer to my notes. I stated to Ms. Haskins, yes, you are. That's a good and a bad thing. Ms. Haskins then replied, why is that? Again, referring to my report, I advised Ms. Haskins, it's a good thing because you are blessed, but it's bad because if I'm hitting it from the back, I'm trying not to say anything. I'm trying not to see nothing saying blessed. I'm thinking about bad shit. Excuse my language. At that point, Ms. Haskins replied, I hear that shit. I then asked Ms. Haskins what was her name. She then advised me that her name was Bubbles because of her ass. Excuse my French.
That's all right. Although I got to tell you, now that we're on television, yeah, you can paraphrase if you need to.
I apologize.
That's okay. It's the new, it's the future.
Right. So. Basically, in paraphrasing, I had asked Ms. Haskins if I wanted to inquire more in reference to a sexual relationship with Ms. Haskins. She advised me that it was going to cost. I advised her what were we talking. She then quoted the price of $150. I went to further specifics of exactly what it was that I wanted.
Thank you.
And she said that
and you wanted
sexual intercourse as well as fellatio.
Thank you.
At that point, Ms. Haskins replied, okay, it's $150 again. At that time, I stated, okay, cool. Upon further investigations, Ms. Haskins then kind of walked away, talked to other people. I just kind of kept an eye on her, had a physical description. At that point, I texted other detectives of Ms. Haskins' description, what she was wearing. She actually came back over to me at that point, was talking to me, dancing some more, at which time uniformed detectives came in. They did a identification check where they go to several dancers there at the location and get their identification. Ms. Haskins being one of them, she was actually still in my presence when they requested her identification. We positively identified her. I then left later on and subsequently received a warrant for Ms. Haskins in reference to prostitution.
All right, this all happened in Baltimore City?
Yes, sir.
All right. You've had a benefit of taking a look at your report. Is there anything in your report that isn't right, or that needs to be amended?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks. February 27th, 2014, Vincent Griffin and Sierra Dennison, GM Holdings Incorporated, trading as Lust, 408 East Baltimore Street. This is a variety of offenses, many of which dealt with employee records, sales receipts, a non-cooperation charge regarding those records. All those charges were dismissed by motion based on our reading of Rule 8 and the evidence presented to us today. We're left with two violations occurring allegedly on April 23rd, 2013, 4.17A and 4.18. For those charges, we entirely relied on the testimony of Detective Fletcher Jackson from the Vice Unit of the Baltimore Police Department, who indicated that on or about April 23rd, 2013, well, everybody at home's heard it 10 times, but for the purpose of the decision phase, we'll have to tell you on the record what we fact found, and that is he went to Lust in plain clothes, and he was approached by a dancer named Miss Haskins, and she wanted to know if he was tipping. And he said he sure was, actually just said yeah. And then he saw a provocative tattoo on her back, and that started a conversation that led down to the idea of whether or not that word was a good idea inked on her during what he had hoped to maybe do with her. And from there was a discussion as to what, that he would like to take her home and see more of her, to which she replied, "It's going to cost you." And the detective then asked for specifics. She replied $150. The detective explained explicitly what he was trying to procure, in addition to the ride home, by using two street terms to describe two sex acts. At that point, allegedly, and we believe the credibility of Detective Jackson, he had almost total recall memory of something that happened 10 months ago, and even though counsel had gotten him to put down his police report, which doesn't happen a lot in these hearings. Most of the time, the police officers read verbatim off the report, and sometimes they can't remember details of things that happened 10 months ago. For whatever reason, Detective Jackson was extremely well brushed up on the facts. Maybe it's something you don't forget. So we believe him when he wrote that, not only when he wrote in his report, 10 months ago, but when he testifies today. She said $150. He said, she said, okay, $150. And that's the way, the emphasis he put on it. That okay, $150, meant something to us. He then called for vice backup. She was identified. She was arrested. And that's where we are today. So what's been argued here, what we have in front of us, we first of all don't believe we should decouple anything in this, need to decouple anything in this conversation. To us, it is a clear solicitation. There was a price. There were first there was a general, how much am I worth? And it's $150. Well, I just want to make sure I'm not just driving you home for $150. So here's what I'm looking for. Okay, okay, $150. He just wanted to make sure that indeed this was not just about a ride home, that this was about more than that. And she made it clear by saying, okay, $150. So we do believe there was solicitation. Was there solicitation to go to the champagne room, if there even is such a thing as a champagne room at your club? No, I don't see that anywhere. However, I see, and we believe unanimously, solicitation occurred in this particular case. The holder of an adult entertainment license is more than aware that there is the possibility of solicitation occurring on his premises. We have 75 years of liquor board involvement, or actually of regulatory agency involvement in adult entertainment violations. We go back to 20, 30 years on these particular regulations. The owner or the licensee of any of these establishments pretty much knows the history, some history of their own establishment. Miss Dennison here, she's a co-licensee. She lives in Pasadena at the same address that the last co-licensee lived at. A licensee who was charged a $5,000 fine for prostitution. So it's pretty clear that licensees know the regs, and they know the penalties for the regs, and they know that adult entertainment establishments on the block have a long history of coming in front of the liquor board for these very same violations. So we require diligence on the part of the licensee to remain in compliance and keep these illegal activities from happening. Is it ridiculous that we file these regulations, we say, do not do that, do not do that, and yet year after year, other licensees violate, and they get charged a fine and get sent out the door? Again, not the legislature, not here to debate these laws, but it is difficult for us to sit up here, and it probably is difficult for licensees to own an adult entertainment establishment and then have these things happen. We believe clearly that solicitation occurred in the establishment. The fact that Detective Jackson claims it was a 10-minute conversation between him and this dancer of the club, they had plenty of time to interact. It wasn't a quick name your price situation. It was a slow discussion that built up into specifics. If there was any administration at all at this bar, the management would have had ample opportunity to make sure that this employee was sticking to a script. It's my understanding that the testimony was that somebody came over and asked if he wanted a drink or buy her a drink, and I don't even think he bought her a drink or bought himself a drink. I don't think that was clear. So what's he doing there? And as far as I know, if you're not buying, if you're not buying drinks and you're not buying a girl drink, why do you get 10 minutes of her time? It's obvious to me there was more than enough time for management to break this scene up if they really were concerned that any kind of solicitation might have been occurring. It's willful blindness. And if a licensee never steps foot in a club, just collects the rent check once a month, drives back to Hunt Valley or Pasadena, then I guess by the argument of counsel, there is no way in the world that that licensee could ever be charged with committing or allowing this stuff to go on in their premises. And that's really not fair, and that's certainly not the intent of the law. And we do find that in this case, with a lengthy conversation, an open and notorious area of the bar, where any other passerby could have heard the language and the discussion that was going on and the little dance with her showing her back, that if there was that there was more than ample opportunity to prevent the solicitation conversation from even meeting the elements of a crime. And by failure of management or licensees to act, that they indeed did allow or permit or suffer to permit a 4.7117A violation, which says that we can't use the premises or allow the premises to be used for the purpose of any sex act. Nope, there was no sex act there. But then it goes on further, nor shall any licensee permit or suffer any employee, patron, or frequenter to solicit any person for prostitution or other immoral purposes. So we found solicitation already happened. We've determined by willful blindness that the licensee has permitted the employee to solicit for an act of sex that was to occur off the premises. And there doesn't say anything in 4.17A that this would have to occur on the premises. So we're left deconstructing 4.17A and determining by a preponderance of the evidence for the reasons just mentioned a guilty finding. We also find a guilty finding to the 4.18. That's a companion charge that because they violated the adult entertainment regs, they are guilty of 4.18. So they are guilty of it, and we'll deal with maybe merger of that in sentencing. The board is decided here. We will merge the 4.18 for penalty purposes with the 4.17A. You said it yourself. This isn't about money. This shouldn't be about money. The board on a first offense has the authority to fine a maximum of $500, suspend or revoke. And that's basically our choices here. $500 is not going to cut this. It's not going to make this kind of behavior stop. And $500, quite frankly, in a first offense on something like this and many other violations is not sufficient to correct the action. The board believes that this is a serious offense, and the board has voted 3-0 to impose a suspension on the license from April 1 to April 30th of 2014, with any of that time being stayed pending any judicial review to the circuit court. So that is our decision.